Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to our training using AI for thematic analysis in qualitative research. As I said, I'm going to get the resources to you in just a moment. So my name is Claire
Yeah,
Moran. It's absolutely my pleasure to be working with you this morning on this session. So to begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we are gathered on, wherever we are across Australia. So I'm in Mianjin, up here in Brisbane in sunny Queensland, and the traditional custodians here are the Turrbal and Yagara people. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also recognise that sovereignty to these lands has never been ceded, and these lands have always been places of teaching, learning, and scholarship. So to begin with, I'd just like to give you a little bit of background about me. There's some nice photos on the screen there I'll tell you about in a moment, but I have a PhD in health psychology from the University of Queensland. I work as a researcher and educator, so I work across lots of different spaces. One of my favorite things that I do is delivering training around qualitative research methodologies. So like what we're doing this morning, um, looking at thematic analysis, but really how we can use AI to assist and where it might be helpful and where it might not be helpful to assist us with our research. My general areas are health, sexual health, and violence prevention, and they're the areas that I work mostly in. I also partner with a number of organisations, including the Australian Industry Graduate Research School, so like the training that we are partnering on this morning. I also work as a casual academic up here in Queensland for QUT. There are some of my research interests, as you can see on the slide. And before I did my PhD, I worked for about a decade as an ESL teacher. So that's teaching English as a second language. So that's, teaching is really something that I love very dearly. And I think this kind of work enables me to bring that kind of ESL background and my love of theory and research and kind of bring those skills together. So I always love doing delivery and teaching. And it's absolutely my pleasure to be working with you today. You can see in those photos. So the top one is so both me and my daughters. The other side of the family is from Fiji. The top one's us at a wedding in Fiji last year. And I'm actually Irish, in case you couldn't tell by my accent. The bottom photo is us at home in Dublin last year for Christmas. We're going back again this year for Christmas, so we'll be flying out on Monday. So this time next week, I will be rugged up in my winter gear because I will be, very firmly in winter in Europe, which will be lovely. So I'd love to hear a little bit about you. So if people are happy to type in the chat box, your name, your university or institution, and the discipline you're working in, what research you're involved in, and one thing that you love about your work. It's just a really good opportunity to get a sense of who else is in our virtual room. So we often find that there's other people who we may want to have conversations with outside of the training, people who might be involved in similar kinds of work, but also just to get an indication of the breadth of different research areas and people that we have joining us this morning. Um, with regards to your cameras on or off, it's totally up to you. I always love to see people's faces, but if you're more comfortable with your camera off, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, if people would like to type in the chat box and just introduce themselves, that would be amazing. I will quickly pop those resources into a folder so I can share that with you in the chat. If you've just arrived, I've just explained my Teams is a bit glitchy this morning and it's not allowing me to attach files. So I'm going to, do a bit of a workaround. So just give me a second or two and I will get these to you. And while I'm doing that, I'd love for people just to type in the chat box, as I said, just introducing themselves and one thing that you love about your work. I'll just get these resources up for you. Okay, let me pop into Google Drive here. Upload this folder. Okay, so that should be happening for us. Sorry, just bear with me one moment while I get these up for you. Technology is amazing when it works and is very tricky when it doesn't. Just bear with me, please. Okay, let me share this. Okay, let me pop this in the chat here. Okay, they are the slides. And then I will read your comments now in just one moment. Okay, so anyone with the link, copy that link, pop that in there. Now, can people just let me know that they are able to access those? And I'm just going to read the comments here. Fantastic. Thank you so much, people, for introducing yourselves. Um, it's always so interesting just to get a sense of the breadth of people and just different yeah, just different research areas. That is absolutely wonderful. Okay, I will make the slides full screen now in just one moment. Um, so just checking if people could just give me a thumbs up to let me know that they've been able to, yeah, you can access. Okay, fantastic. If I'm in the slides, as I said, my Teams is very glitchy this morning. So if I'm in the slides, I can't actually see the chat or I can't see people's faces. So, if there's something that's not working your end, please feel free to yeah, just shout in, just interrupt me, and that's absolutely fine. The other thing I will upload is our recommended reading list and resources. But let's get going with our slides and our content. Okay, fantastic. So the structure of the session. So we're going to be talking first of all about establishing fit. So thinking about AI in relation to your own analytic approach and your epistemology. And we'll be using a tool. So the acronym I'm using for that is FRAME. So just to get us thinking through whether AI is actually appropriate for what we're actually trying to do. So does it actually fit with our analytic approach and our epistemological position? I'll be explaining that in more detail in a couple of moments. We're going to be moving in then to looking at prompting. So one of the things that I think can get overlooked with using AI is the importance of really strong and effective prompts. So, looking at what makes a good prompt, how we can actually tailor a prompt to get the kind of output that we're looking for. And so when we're thinking about prompting, we're really thinking about, garbage in, garbage out. So if our prompting is not really effective, we're not going to get the kinds of results that we're looking for. And then we can get into this kind of loop with AI, which is really unhelpful. So we'll be looking at different types of prompts. So the one that I use most frequently, the acronym I use for that is CRAFT. So that again, each of those letters indicates a particular step, and I'll be talking you through that in a moment. And I use that across all different types of AI use. And it's really effective to get us to really think about and unpack what it is we're wanting to use AI for. And that, I think, prompting well has two really important functions. One of those functions is around the output. But another one of those functions is it really gets us to critically think about before we even engage with the AI, what it is we're actually looking for. Okay, what is the purpose of the exchange? What do we want AI to do? Why do we want it to produce this? What kind of format, what role do we want it to play? So we'll be unpacking that. And as I said, that is very handy to use across a range of different contexts. We're also going to be looking at Socratic prompts. So that is drawing on Socrates, the philosopher. And in terms of that approach, it's looking at basically asking a particular question and then based on the output, then following that up with another question, based on the output, following that up with another question. So what we're really trying to get AI to do there is to kind of simulate critical thinking. And so we can, by using two different prompt strategies, we're also able to really think about, is there a difference in terms of the output across these different strategies, and then you can make decisions about what might be most effective for your particular research or the types of questions that you're looking at. We're going to look at some coding, so manual versus AI coding, so comparing human coding with AI coding using codebook guidance, and then moving into theme development, so refining codes into themes, what that looks like with AI assistance and without AI assistance, and considering whether there's a difference across those. And then to kind of, I suppose, wrap up, to kind of bring it all together at the end of our session, we'll be really thinking about reflexive evaluation. And so reflexivity is really important within qualitative research. When we're talking about reflexivity, we're talking about reflecting on our own subjectivity, okay? And so using, again, that FRAME acronym to review risks, to think about rigor, and also how AI shaped your process. And then talking then at the end, really importantly, about ethics and disclosure. So really key areas in ethics, thinking about consent, transparency, and responsible AI use in real projects. So that's the structure of our session. They're the learning outcomes which you would have seen when you signed up for this course. So I'm not going to go through those now. But let's dive into the content and first of all talk about what we mean by AI. So when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about a singular thing. We're talking about a whole landscape of different tools that are, and what these different tools and this landscape has in common is that they are actually computer systems that are designed to perform tasks that usually require human intelligence. So these tools are fed on huge amounts of data. And so when we are engaging with AI and we receive an output, what we're actually receiving is a best guess, if you like, in terms of we're receiving the most likely, the most statistically likely response from the question that we have asked. Okay, so the output is what is most likely based on the question that we've asked. But as we can obviously gather, that is in relation to the data that it has seen. So again, thinking about AI as it's, a computer system that has been fed on an enormous corpus of data. And so the output is the most statistically likely response based on the data that it has, what it has access to, what it has been exposed to. So these tools can fall into a number of different areas. So probably the most common and widely used tools at this point are large language models. So for example, ChatGPT, which we'll be using quite a bit today in our training, and also Claude. And so basically these can be really useful for things like summarizing, for drafting codes, for writing scaffolds. So if we're thinking about all of the different tasks that we might want AI to assist us with, those kinds of tools that we're choosing will be different across the task. So, for example, if we're wanting AI to help with, verifying references, well, we might use a tool like Cite, or we might use, if we're looking at, referencing in terms of, connections, we're trying to find more literature or get an understanding of the connections between different papers and maybe move outside of our fields, we might use a tool like Research Rabbit. If we're wanting to build a presentation or present our data in a visual way, we might use a tool like Gamma. If we're wanting to get a sense of other research in the area, we might use a tool like Elicit, which is powered by Semantic Scholar. So again, we have a whole plethora of tools. Many of these tools are tailored for, specific use. For the purpose of our training today, we're going to be focusing on really using those large language models because that is what's most effective with assisting with coding and theme development. But we're also going to be talking a lot about if and when AI is or isn't appropriate to assist with these tasks. Literature tools like Perplexity and Elicit, so for things like sourcing and also for synthesizing, coding and early analytic tools, so Quali GPT, that's a particular GPT that we can use. It's freely available, as in people can set up GPTs and you can set up a private GPT. Quali GPT is an open available GPT, but we don't need to use Quali GPT if we're again thinking about our prompting and developing really clear prompts. They can be really useful for exploring, themes and assisting with early analysis. And then, as I said, then we have writing and synthesis tools like Gamma and Tome. So if we're situating AI, it's also really important that we're situating qualitative research. And so when we're talking about qualitative research, well, what exactly is this? So the core work of qualitative research, our bread and butter work, really is about meaning and meaning making. So what we are interested in is how people make meaning, and that can be from, their experiences, from their engagements through different aspects of their life. But really, we're interested in how people make meaning, how people understand and interpret the world. So we're interested in meaning, experience, and interpretation. Obviously, we're not interested in measurement or prediction or counting things. So within qualitative research, the size of something is not an indication of its importance. The frequency of something is not an indication of its importance. So we're interested in, small, rich data sets. We're often interested in, contradiction. We're interested in context. We're interested in nuance and complexity. We understand that meaning and meaning making are tied to specific localized contexts. And what we're interested in is that we're interested in how and why. So how things happen, why they happen, or how people have an experience, why they have an experience, and what it feels like to have that experience. Okay. So we're not talking about kind of, right or wrong, because somebody could, a participant could say something and it could be totally wrong, or we could totally disagree with it. That makes no difference because, again, what we're interested in is how people make meaning. So we're interested in our participants' interpretation of the world. And then our job as qualitative researchers is to interpret our participants' interpretation. So just to say as well, that the type of work we do as qualitative researchers broadly falls into two areas. So one of those is experiential work, and I've got my little pair of shoes here to represent this. So if we're thinking about experiential work, we're basically centering people's lived experience. And so really what we're interested in is validating meaning in the data telling it like it is. And the pair of shoes, what this represents is our focus is what is it like in this person's shoes? So what is it like for this person? So here we're really centering lived experience, okay, and validating the interpretation of our participants. We can also be doing more critical work. And if we're doing more critical work, the interpretation of the researcher is actually more important than the interpretation of the participants. Now, that doesn't mean we don't recognize people are experts in their own lives. What that means is we're actually interrogating meaning in the data. Okay, we're not interrogating our participants, we're interrogating the data. And what we're trying to understand is what is it about the broader social context that this person is living in that means this person is having this experience. So it's a more critical orientation to our data. But most qualitative research actually sits in this space where it is focused on that kind of experiential work where we are validating meaning in the data, and we are really putting front and center people's own interpretation of their lived experience. So regardless of whether you're doing one of those or the other, so regardless of whether you've got a more experiential orientation or a critical orientation, the researcher is never neutral in qualitative research. And this is something that's incredibly important for us to recognize when it's really important anyway, but particularly when we're thinking about AI. So if we're saying the researcher is not neutral, what that means is our interpretation of our data is shaped by our positionality, it's shaped by our values, it's shaped by our reflexivity. Okay, so if we hold that the researcher's interpretation is a vital part of qualitative research, but we're getting AI to assist with our analysis, well, then who is responsible for the interpretation? Whose interpretation is it? Is it your interpretation? Is it AI's interpretation? So these are some questions we're going to be exploring in our time together today. So recognizing the researcher is central to the research process. So then if we bring these two things together and we're talking about, well, AI meets qualitative research. So what does that mean? So again, if we're thinking about what AI does, we're talking about pattern recognition. Okay, so it's recognizing patterns, giving you the most statistically likely output based on the information that it has. If we think about what we're doing as qualitative researchers, we're in the business of meaning and meaning making. So what we can see then is that AI typically aligns with a positivist logic, not with interpretive paradigms. So when we're talking about a positivist logic, we're talking about a knowable reality. Okay, so if we think about positivism, that is usually situated within quantitative research, where we're talking about, I'm going to use my little dinosaur here as an example to kind of illustrate what we're talking about. We're talking about a singular objective reality. Okay, so we can see this little dinosaur. I didn't make the dinosaur. The dinosaur exists independent of me. I don't need to see the dinosaur for it to exist. And how do I get access to the dinosaur? Well, I would get a shovel and I would dig the dinosaur up. Okay. So from that perspective, from that kind of positivist perspective, knowledge is discovered through research. Okay, because if I dig the dinosaur up, I don't then say, look, I made a dinosaur. You'd say, well, you didn't make the dinosaur, you dug the dinosaur up. Okay, so knowledge is discovered through the research process within that positivist logic. That's very different to an interpretive paradigm. So if we're talking from an interpretive paradigm sitting in that more qualitative space, and I'm going to use my little brick wall here as an example, what we're saying is that knowledge is not discovered through research, but knowledge is created or constructed through research. Okay, so we can see here, like if we bring back in our little dinosaur, and I say to you, that's not a dinosaur, it's a cup of coffee, you'd say, well, it's not a cup of coffee, that's clearly a dinosaur. I can see it's a dinosaur. Okay, so we're talking about a singular objective reality. Whereas here, what we can see is that there are many different configurations that these bricks can have. And we cannot claim that one configuration of these bricks is more correct than another configuration, okay? So we recognize from this perspective that knowledge is constructed through research, and that when we are doing qualitative research, we're actually telling one story of a number of possible stories that could be told about a data set. Now, when I'm saying one story, that doesn't mean that qualitative research is not rigorous, because we always want to be doing the most rigorous research that we can possibly do. We want our research to be of the highest possible standard. But we're recognizing that nonetheless, with following a rigorous process, that there is never a singular story that can be told about a data set. So any knowledge claims we're making about a data set is always grounded in the data. We're always providing the evidence for any claims that we're making, but we recognize nonetheless it is one story of a number of possible stories, because sitting within this qualitative space, there is not one single knowable reality. There are multiple potential realities. So we can see there, a very different framing within quantitative research, and we can see how AI might sit much more comfortably in that space. And we can start to see now where AI use is more complicated, if you like, when we're thinking about it sitting in that qualitative space. So what I would urge people to practice is epistemic humility, bit of a mouthful. And just to kind of backtrack a bit of a moment here, when we're talking about epistemic, you might think, well, what does that even mean? So that's obviously from the word epistemology, often in Australia pronounced epistemology. What we're talking about with epistemology or epistemology is, what is it possible for us to know? And in order to understand epistemology, the precursor to that is ontology. Okay. So if we think about ontology as the big O, now you used to think the big O was orgasm. It's not orgasm anymore. The big O is now ontology. Okay. So ontology is the big O. The fact it's a circle, so think about that circle kind of representing the world, okay? And so the question is, with ontology, what is it possible to know? What can I know? And then the follow-on question, once the ontological question has been answered, is, okay, so how now do I go about acquiring that knowledge? How do I go about acquiring that knowledge? So basically, are we talking about, for example, a singular objective reality? So if I wanted to discover a dinosaur, I'd need a shovel. Okay, how do I go about acquiring the knowledge? I need a particular tool to dig up a dinosaur. Versus, how do I go about acquiring this knowledge? I would need, a trowel and a spirit level, for example, to build a wall. Okay. Doesn't mean that dinosaurs are better than wolves or wolves are better than dinosaurs. What we're talking about is different questions require different tools. So some of the work that we're doing might be sitting in that more quantitative space, and we might be working with that positivist logic. Other work that we're doing might be more in that qualitative space, and it doesn't kind of necessarily sit well within AI use, but that's what we're going to be unpacking in our training. So really thinking about what are the assumptions behind the tools that we're using. So for example, if you're saying, I want to do a piece of research and I am taking a social constructionist perspective, for example, and I'm going to get AI to assist me with my coding and my theme development, well, then we can see that there's kind of an incongruence between what your epistemic position is and the use of AI, because again, the use of AI is more aligned with a positivist logic. So if that's a lot to take in, let some of that go over your head if that feels pretty dense. Really, what I want you to take away from this is just thinking about what assumptions are behind the tools that we use, okay? And recognizing that AI is more comfortably sitting within that positivist space, that there is a single knowable truth. For example, the themes reside in the data, the themes are already there. The job of the researcher is to get access to the themes, okay? Cognitive sovereignty is an incredibly useful term, and I think this is useful not just for the training that we're doing today, but this is useful for every time we use AI. So whether in our professional life, whether in our personal life. So to really think about who is doing the interpreting, okay? Is it you or is it AI? What I want to maintain is I want to maintain my cognitive sovereignty. So my brain is basically a muscle. I want my brain to keep working. Okay. I want my critical thinking skills to get stronger. I want my analytic skills to get stronger. I want my research skills to get stronger. I also want to be able to stand by the claims that I'm making and recognize that I have accountability and responsibility for any claims that I am making about a data set. Okay. So I need to make sure that I am maintaining sovereignty over my own cognition. So, what we don't want to be doing is we don't want to be outsourcing our thinking to AI. We want to be using AI in particular ways to support, but we don't want to be outsourcing our thinking to AI. Okay. And these questions are really key in terms of how AI shapes the work that we do. So we're just going to look at some guiding metaphors for understanding AI's role. Just give me 1 second. I just want to grab another prop. Won't be a second. Okay, so these are really useful for, I suppose, thinking about how we can conceptualize AI in ways that are actually useful for us. So one of these is as an intern. So here's my little friend. This is my little intern. And so she is great at organizing data, at drafting text, at spotting patterns, but she lacks context. She lacks ethics and she lacks reflexivity. Okay. So I need to decide what matters. So she is my intern. We can also think about AI as like a mirror. Okay. So if we think about it like a mirror, so what it's basically going to do is it's going to reflect back to us dominant discourses and biases. Okay, so remembering that AI's understanding, because of course it's not actually understanding, is statistical. It is not interpretive. Okay, so it's a mirror, it's mirroring back what it's been fed. And so gaps in nuance that we might find in output are often indicative of deeper epistemological limits. Again, AI can only respond to us based on the corpus of data that it has been fed. It's also useful to think about AI like an amplifier, or this is another way AI can behave, if you like, in terms of what we're wanting it to do. So, yes, it can accelerate our workflow, but it can also magnify blind spots or assumptions. Okay. What you feed AI, so including your prompts and the kinds of questions that you're asking it, will actually shape what gets amplified. So, there's just some really useful metaphors to think about what AI's role is, and I think they really help us situate our own responsibility and our own positioning within that exchange. So we're not using AI in a way that is kind of extractive. We're using AI to assist kind of a back and forth and to help support our work. Okay. But it's not doing the thinking for us. So again, we're maintaining that cognitive sovereignty. So I've touched on this quite a bit, and I just want to just kind of run through this just once more, just to highlight these really key differences. Just give me 1 moment. So with AI tools, excuse me, there is like an implied epistemology. Okay, so because even if we're talking about the idea of an objective reality, excuse me, it isn't even really like when I say it's based on positivist logic. what we get back from AI, again, is based on what it has been fed. So the implied epistemological position is positivist, but in its true sense, it actually, in some ways, doesn't even have an epistemological position because it's literally feeding back what is the most likely response based on the data that it has. If we then move that over to qualitative research and we're talking about an interpretive epistemology, from a qualitative perspective, knowledge is constructed through meaning. So knowledge is constructed through the research process. AI prioritizes frequency and similarity, whereas qualitative research values contradiction, it values nuance, it values divergence. And again, to highlight that point, that frequency is not an indication of importance in qualitative research, neither is size, okay? And so there really we can see a massive kind of incongruence between those two things. AI tools tend towards generalization and fluency. Whereas qualitative research, what we're looking for is we're looking for depth. We're always interested in context and we're interested in complexity. AI treats text as data to process, whereas qualitative research conceptualizes language as socially and emotionally embedded. And so, again, if we think about language here, if we are sitting in a kind of experiential space and we're thinking about, well, what does language mean in this space? And again, what's it like in this person's shoes? We're talking about language as reflecting people's unique lived experience, okay? And we want people, like if we think about, for example, why we do semi-structured interviews and not structured interviews, we want people to take the story where they choose. We want people to be able to describe their world on their own terms and in their own type of language. If we are taking a more critical approach to our qualitative work, we're not thinking about language reflecting meaning. We're thinking about language as actually constructing meaning. So we bring meaning into the world through language. And again, we can see there a big difference between what AI tools are doing with text and language versus what a qualitative paradigm is conceptualizing text and language. AI frames insight as output, whereas qualitative research frames insight as co-created and reflexively interpreted. Okay, so reflexively interpreted, that means I, the researcher, am interpreting my data, and that is how insight is generated through research. Again, any knowledge claims I make have to be embedded in the data. I have to be able to provide evidence in the data, but nonetheless, we recognize it is interpreted by the qualitative researcher. So if we, and I don't want to kind of bog people down in theory and epistemology, but I feel like these are important ways to frame the training kind of at the outset. We will be moving into lots of practical activities quite soon. So I hope you're not thinking, oh my God, this is a lot of, theory. But as I said, I think it's important to kind of frame the discussion and really, where there is that congruence, but also where there is that incongruence. So here we're looking at some different paradigms, and I'm just looking for another prop to kind of assist our conversation with this. So we're thinking here about different paradigms which have different epistemological positions and therefore may fit or may not fit comfortably with AI use. Okay, so if we're talking about a positivist perspective, we're talking about an objective, measurable reality. So again, I say, look, here is a dinosaur. Here is a singular dinosaur. You cannot say it's not a dinosaur. You can't tell me it's three dinosaurs. You cannot tell me it's 3 cups of coffee. We can all see it is a single dinosaur. It's an objective reality. So therefore, we can see that AI fit would be high for these kinds of framings, okay, for kind of a positivist framing. If you're like a little bit kind of not clear on some of these terms, an easy way to remember positivism is think about the positivist said, I am positive there is a single knowable reality. Okay, I'm positive this is the case. The post-positivist said, yes, there is a single objective reality. This is true, but that's not the full story. Okay. And the reason it's not the full story is because we have to engage with this objective reality through our human selves, okay, through our senses, but also our way of engaging with the world is mediated by our language and our culture. So we know that observation is fallible, okay? So it's not as simple as just saying, from a post-positivist perspective, it's not as simple as saying there is one single knowable reality. It's like, yes, that is true, but we need to interpret the world through our human senses. Okay, so the observation is fallible. So we can say that it's a moderate, perhaps high, but maybe, a moderate AI fit. If we're working more in this interpretive space, we're interested in, again, what is it like in this person's shoes? Okay. We recognize meaning and meaning making are tied to specific context. So it's context bound and subjective meaning. Okay. What is it like for this person? So we are centering that lived experience. And so we can see there that AI fit would be low. If we are sitting in that kind of constructionist space, we have a more interrogatory stance to our data. We're thinking about knowledge as being socially constructed. So again, we see that it's not a very useful fit for AI. If we're sitting in that critical or transformative space, we're saying that knowledge is shaped by power and ideology. So while constructionism can also be considering power and the role of power, criticalism and transformative paradigms are really centering power and ideology. And the focus really is on how knowledge is shaped by power and ideology. If we are sitting in a more pragmatist space, so pragmatic research tends to be very outcome and very utility focused, so it's use orientated. And we can see here that our AI fit might be moderate to high. So we can see across different paradigms that we could have different fits with AI, which would indicate whether or not it might be appropriate to assist in analysis. So I just a word on paradigms before we move on from this. So I think what people can feel sometimes then is which paradigm is the best paradigm or which paradigm should I choose for my research? And so what I would always say is research is always question led. Okay. So what that means is we're never choosing a paradigm. What we're doing is we're thinking, what is my research question? And what are the aims of this particular piece of research? And on the basis of the question and the aims, we then select the paradigm. So we're not selecting the paradigm at the beginning. It's always led by the question. What's my question? What are my research aims? And then we're choosing the most appropriate paradigm. So recognizing that all paradigms are incredibly valuable, they just enable us to answer different types of questions. So here I have a little box and it says on it, choose the right tools for the job. What's my research question? Okay. And so in here, if we open it, we can see that we've got all of these different paradigms. And so we're recognizing they're all really valuable. It just depends on the question. Okay. So if you were to imagine this as being a cupboard in your house, and inside that cupboard, you've got all of these little toolboxes. Okay. And let's say you've got a toolbox for gardening and you've got another one for painting, and you've got another one for cleaning. Okay. So if you want to clean the bathroom, you're not going to take out a paintbrush because you're recognizing a paintbrush is not a useful tool to do that particular job. Okay. The same as if you want to paint a wall, you're not going to take out a shovel because you're recognizing, well, that's not a suitable tool for that job. But you're also not saying the only toolbox I'm ever going to use is my gardening toolbox because you're recognizing, well, that's great for gardening. It's not great for painting. It's not great for cleaning. So I want you to be thinking about paradigms in that type of way also, that all paradigms are valuable, how we make decisions about which one to choose always comes back to what is the job I'm trying to do? Okay. What paradigm is the most appropriate fit? So, what the job is pertains to what's my research question and what are my aims. So I mentioned earlier when we talked about the kind of session overview that we'd be using this framework that I've called FRAME, which is just an acronym just to help you think through how you're using AI within your qualitative research. And so because our training today is about thematic analysis, we're thinking specifically in terms of how you might be using AI to support analysis, or if it's basically a decision making framework, okay, to help you arrive at the most appropriate approach for you to use. So first of all, the F is standing for fit. So thinking about, is AI use appropriate for your research paradigm? Does it align with your research aims? Okay. The R is for role. So what role is AI playing in your analytic process? Okay. So is it like my little assistant here? Is it acting as an assistant? Okay. Is it acting as an organizer? Is it acting as a suggester? Or are you like asking it to do the analysis for you, which is obviously not going to be appropriate? Are you clear on what tasks should remain human-led? Thinking about accountability. So, what are the epistemological or methodological assumptions that are baked into how AI simulates interpretation? Okay. Because again, when we are, having an exchange with AI and it's generating output, it may be simulating interpretation, it may be simulating, you know, um, critical thinking. If we're using it in our personal lives, it may be simulating empathy. It may be simulating lots of different things, but remembering what it's doing is it's simulating, it's not actual interpretation. Okay. And so thinking about how the simulated interpretation, for example, compares to your actual human interpretation, because qualitative research is very firmly it's human work, it's human meaning making. Then thinking about meaning. So how do I understand the relationship between the data and meaning? So for example, is meaning to be extracted? Okay, so again, like digging the dinosaur up out of the ground. So meaning is to be distracted. Is meaning interpreted? Okay, or is meaning constructed where we're doing this more critical work? And is this understanding congruent with your use of AI? And then thinking about ethics. And ethics, of course, is not an afterthought. It's just simply the E in the acronym. So how are you protecting participant data? So for example, anonymizing data before uploading. So thinking about, have you gained informed consent for any AI assisted processes? Can you confidently disclose and justify your AI use? And obviously then at the beginning of a research project, when we're going for ethics, including any use in your ethics application. Like what we can see as well at the moment is this is such an evolving area. So we can see that there is actually quite a disconnect between, and this is kind of anecdotally, we can see there's quite a disconnect between how AI is actually being used and how people are divulging AI use and institutional responses and approaches to whether or not it's okay to use AI. So, some journals, for example, might have, that you have to tick a box to say if you've used AI to assist, and it can be for something like, helping, with your writing or whatever it is. I've heard of papers being rejected because authors disclosed AI use in the submission and then the paper got rejected. In terms of at a university level, some universities are quite encouraging of AI use in particular ways. Other universities are very much that AI cannot be used at all. So we're kind of seeing a lot of different types of responses. So we obviously are all acknowledging that this is a very fast moving area. Even 3 years ago, we wouldn't have even been doing this training. So, where we end up in 5 years' time or in 3 years' time will be very different to where we are today. But there isn't kind of one, excuse me, hard and fast kind of approach to, across different institutions, across different peer-reviewed journals, for example. It is, very much kind of variable. So I think it's always important to, if you're considering using AI before you do it, like if you're submitting an article for a particular journal, maybe checking the guidelines of that journal beforehand, talking to your ethics committee, finding out, what the policies are within your university and faculty and everything else. So I just want to move into before we start doing some activities. And as I said, we will be doing a lot of activities. You'll be working in breakout rooms. So soon I will stop talking, I promise, and give you an opportunity to apply some of what we are talking about. But I think, again, it's really important to situate the key areas that we're speaking about. So we're going to talk now about what is thematic analysis. So, at its broadest level, thematic analysis is a method for identifying and interpreting patterns of meaning in a data set. It is extremely popular, and part of the reason thematic analysis is so popular is because it's incredibly flexible. So, it can be used across large and small data sets. It can be used across lots of different types of research questions. It can be used across different paradigms. It can be used with, different types of data, different types of research questions, different types of paradigms. So really flexible. When I say it can be used across different paradigms, what I mean by that is it's actually itself theoretically neutral. So thematic analysis is a method, not a methodology. And so what I mean by that is other ways of analyzing qualitative data are methodologies. And what that means is that they have theoretical and philosophical underpinnings. Okay. So let's say, for example, if you say, I am doing discourse analysis, well, what that means is you have to take an interrogatory stance to your data. Your theoretical perspective will be social constructionist. Okay. If you say, for example, you're doing interpretive phenomenological analysis, what that means is you are validating lived experience, you are telling it like it is, you are centering the person's experience. What's it like in this person's shoes? You cannot say you're doing an IPA, but you're going to take a social constructionist perspective. So, other ways of analyzing qualitative data are methodologies. So they have specific theoretical and philosophical underpinnings. Thematic analysis doesn't. Okay. So again, it's got that flexibility. It's also very straightforward to implement. So there's a clear set of, steps that you can work through. So I think it's very kind of practically orientated. And I think, one of the things with doing research is we've always got this balance between theory and practice. And so while, sometimes theoretically we might understand what we want to do, we understand the theoretical lens we want to take. We may then have the question, this is something that I know, for example, when I, did my PhD, I'd come up against again and again when I was really learning the tools of the trade. How do I operationalize that? Like, what do I actually do in practice? And that can be really, really tricky. And that's, I think, again, where thematic analysis is incredibly powerful, that it is, you've got those kind of clear steps to operationalize. It requires conceptual clarity, so you need to be clear on why you are doing what you're doing. And as I said, we can use it across different paradigms, but we can also use it across a range of different disciplines. Now, I'm talking there a little bit like thematic analysis is a singular thing. It absolutely isn't. It is a family of approaches. So if you look across the literature, you'll see lots of, excuse me, lots of different approaches that are basically saying they're thematic analysis. Those approaches can be kind of grouped into three, it can be broadly grouped into three members of a family. So think of them as being like three quite different siblings. Okay. So, and they kind of come under the umbrella of research that calls itself thematic analysis. So the first of these is coding reliability. And so the clue is in the name. So if we think about the word reliability, that typically aligns itself with a quantitative paradigm, because when we're talking about reliability, we're talking about that I can do the same thing as another researcher and I can find the same results. Okay, so it's a positivist epistemology. So again, we're saying that there is an objective reality, and the work of the researcher is to uncover that objective reality. So what we're basically purporting here is that the themes pre-exist in the data. Okay, so the perspective would be the themes are already there. The job of the researcher is to identify the themes. Okay, so this is an approach that uses a code book. And so the data is used as a way to identify the codes and the themes in the code book. You may or may not be familiar with the terms small q, medium q, and big Q. They're terms that are used in the literature to kind of distinguish between different kinds of research. So what they basically mean is all of these, so small q, medium q, big Q, they're all using qualitative data, okay? But small q, which is coding reliability, is using qualitative data, but it's basically taking a quantitative approach. So again, we can see positivism sits within that quantitative space. Okay. So coding reliability is small q, qualitative data, yes, but the approach is actually a quantitative approach, which is talking about an objective reality. Codebook would be regarded as medium Q, and that kind of sits in the middle. And so when we move into our more practical activities, we're going to be using a codebook approach. So this is from a post-positivist perspective, typically. And so what we're talking again here about is that there is an objective reality, but that reality is mediated by our human understanding of the world. So from that perspective, reality is only ever partially accessible, and we interpret the world through our human selves, our senses, our language, and our culture, background, and everything else. So from this perspective, the themes are partially constructed. They can be derived from the data collection tools. So when we talk about data collection tools, we're talking about a code book that is developed before the analysis begins. But they can also be created from the data analysis process. So why codebook is medium Q is because it's basically straddling these two worlds between objectivity. You're saying that there's an objective reality, but we are also recognizing researcher subjectivity. If then we look at reflexive thematic analysis, and this is the approach that Braun and Clark use, this is a non-positivist approach. So it's either a constructionist or an interpretive paradigm. And so the view of themes here is that themes are actively constructed during the analysis. So thematic analysis, so reflexive thematic analysis is big Q qualitative research. So what that means is qualitative data, and the approach is embedded in a qualitative paradigm. So a qualitative ontology, a qualitative epistemology, qualitative practices, qualitative thinking, a qualitative sensibility. So it's very much embedded in a big Q qualitative paradigm. So here our themes are actively constructed during the analysis. From this perspective, thematic analysis is inherently subjective, and researcher subjectivity is emphasized. So we recognize then that the analysis is generated at the intersection of three different things. Excuse me. So with these three things, I like to think of these as the Holy Trinity. Okay. So the three different things being, so one, the theoretical assumption. So that is your theoretical perspective. Two, your analytic resources. That is you as the researcher. And the third thing is the data. Okay. So what we can see is that is very different to a positivist approach where we're conceptualizing themes as pre-existing in the data. Okay, here we're saying the analysis is generated in the intersection of three different things. The themes are not residing in the data. We are actively constructing the themes through our theoretical perspective, our analytic resource, which is us as a researcher, and then the third thing is the data. So we can see very, very different between big Q and small q, and then medium Q is sitting in that middle space. So how then do we conceptualize this in terms of AI compatibility? So again, coding reliability, we're saying themes pre-exist in the data. So AI can assist in coding and theme development when well prompted. So again, that it should not be surprising, given that we're basically saying the themes are already in the data. My job as a researcher is to extract what already exists, like the dinosaur in the ground, okay? Code book sitting in that post-positive space where we're viewing themes as partially constructed. So the themes are constructed by the code book, which is developed before the analysis, plus through the research process. So the code book can evolve during the research process. So here AI can support code book and organizing our themes and structuring, but always with researcher oversight. Okay, so again, thinking about, if I bring back my assistant into the picture, thinking about what is it we're wanting the AI to do. Okay, so we're treating from this perspective the AI as an assistant in helping us with aspects of our analytic process. If we're sitting in that reflexive thematic analysis space, here we're saying that themes are actively constructed through the analysis. Okay, so they're actively constructed. So what therefore we can say is that AI is not suitable or appropriate. Okay, and why is that? Because it lacks reflexivity, it lacks the capacity for genuine interpretation, and it lacks contextual judgment. Okay, so all of those things within a big Q qualitative space that we say are fundamental to qualitative research are absolutely at odds with what AI can do. Okay. And again, that epistemological position, there is a misalignment between those two things. So in a moment, one of the things I will share with you as well is, as I said, the reading list and the so references from the training and a reading list. And so when I share that with you, you'll see I've separated that into two. So the first page is references that pertain specifically to thematic analysis. The second page is more broadly to AI use in qualitative research. The reason I'm talking about this now is very recently there was a commentary or position paper released signed by Braun and Clark of, Braun and Clark reflexive thematic analysis, and also signed by many other qualitative researchers globally. And basically, this paper was stating that AI is not appropriate for use with reflexive qualitative research. And these are fundamentally the reasons why. Again, there's a massive disconnect. They also talk about other concerns that they have with AI use. So there is a link to that. The reference is in that reference list. There's also, and I can highlight this when I send it through, there's also another paper that's in there, which it was published in the last couple of weeks, and that is a response. It's basically pulling together all of those responses to that particular position paper, and it's looking at across different platforms. So, what was said on LinkedIn, what was said on Facebook, what was said here, what was said there. So really just kind of pulling together all of the different perspectives. So that's really where the current thinking is at. And I just think if we're interested in AI for thematic analysis, it's important that we, have a sense of where these debates are going and what those core arguments are. So you'll find all of that in the reference list, which I'll share with you. I'll put it in the chat once we get into our breakout rooms. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you before you have a chance to do some work together and get a chance to apply some of what we're talking about is this prompt framework, and this is supporting our first activity. So I mentioned kind of at the beginning the importance of writing really, really good prompts. Okay, so again, garbage in, garbage out. The output you get from AI is only going to be as effective as the prompt that you're creating. Okay, and so when we are putting together a prompt, we need to be thinking about what exactly are we wanting AI to do and what kind of output are we looking for. Okay. So this is a prompt example to support analysis. Okay. So the acronym here is CRAFT. So again, unlike with Frame, it's got 5 letters, one on each finger. And I think it's just useful if you can learn the letters off, what each letter stands for. So then you can just kind of run through it. You don't need the paper in front of you, you can just run through it, and that can be a really useful framework to apply. So here our C is for context. And so what you need to do is you need to define the situation. Okay, so an example might be if you're getting AI to assist with your code book, it might be suggest initial codes and descriptors for a thematic analysis code book. Okay, what's the role? So what is ChatGPT or your large language model? What is the persona that you want it to take? Okay, so again, we have the little assistant here. What are we wanting her to do? Okay, so imagine you're employing someone to do a particular job. You need to tell them if you want them to do the job well, you need to be clear on what it is you're wanting them to do. So it's exactly the same. So the persona, for example, act as a research assistant to assist with coding and describing excerpts based on features or topic focus. Okay, so this is just an example of using the craft prompt framework. But again, you're thinking about what is a persona, what exactly is you're wanting AI to do, or what is the persona, sorry, that you wanted to embody. Then the next letter is A for action. What do you want it to do? So I wanted to suggest codes and descriptors for excerpts to support researcher-led theme development. What kind of output do I want? So you're setting the out. So this is a format, so setting the output structure. So for example, bullet point list with concise descriptors and a short explanation for each. Now, one of the things I haven't put in here, which could be quite important, is you might want to ask, identify where in the text each code, identify which piece of text each code pertains to. Okay, so if it gives you a code and a descriptor, well, where exactly in the text is the piece of data that code pertains to or that code was generated from? And then thinking about the target audience. So who is it actually for? And this is really important as well, because the audience will obviously also have a big impact on what the output's going to be and the suitability of the output. So for example, this could be for a qualitative researcher developing a thematic analysis codebook. Okay, so that's our craft prompt framework, and we're using it here to support analysis. But as I said, you can use it across all different kinds of things. So again, what's the context? What's the role? So what persona do you want your large language model to embody? What's the action you want it to do? What format do you want it to give the output in? And who is it for? Who is your target audience? Okay, so we're going to now move into doing an activity using AI to support codebook thematic analysis. So we're going to work with 2 excerpts from a study. So the title of the study is Becoming and Belonging, Migrant Identity Across Life Stages in Australia. The study explores how first-generation migrants in Australia navigate identity, belonging, and self-expression across multiple social settings. They're the participants. The method is codebook thematic analysis. The epistemology is critical realism. Okay, so that's a bit of a background about the study, which you don't actually need for what we're doing. I just wanted to provide some context for you. Okay, so this is the first activity that we are going to do. So again, this is in your slide handout, and you'll also see, so that's in the slides, but you'll also see in the second document I shared, which is a participant handout, you can see the first activity here. So it's activity 1 on page 1, prompting lab. So craft prompt. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Okay, so use the craft prompt framework and instruct ChatGPT to, okay, so what you're instructing it to is suggest 5 code labels, provide a brief description for each quote, provide a brief description for each code and identify a supporting quote for each code. So that means basically, again, which piece of data does each code pertain to? Okay, so what I'd like you to do is run your prompt and discuss the reflection questions. Okay, so you've got 2 short reflection questions here in the handout. So what worked well? What felt reductive or misaligned? Okay, so on the next slide, excuse me, on the next slide we have the piece of data. So what I will do is I will copy the piece of data, the excerpt, into the chat so that you can just copy and paste that. Well, of course, actually, you can copy and paste it from the PDF. So yeah, maybe that might be the easiest thing to do. Any problem with that, let me know, and I can copy and paste it into the chat. But that is your the excerpt. So again, going back to the question, what are we wanting to do? So let's go back and just read this again to check we're all clear. You want to, first of all, rewrite the vague prompt. So the prompt says, generate a provisional codebook for this data. That is really vague. Like if we go back one slide and look at the prompt framework, we can see, well, the prompt that we're using is actually really vague. Okay, so how can we make that prompt more effective? Use the framework to help you. And then when you have rewritten the prompt, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms and you can do this together. Okay, so have a go rewriting the prompt. When you've rewritten the prompt, then I'd like you to paste your prompt into ChatGPT with the data and ask it to suggest the code labels, provide a description for each code, sorry, I've said that again the wrong time, and identify supporting quote for each code. Okay, let's see what output you get and then have a chat about the questions. And again, that is the quote that we are using to run with our prompt. So I'm going to escape the full screen here because, as I mentioned at the beginning, my Teams is very glitchy this morning, so I can't, if I'm looking at my PowerPoint, I can't actually see the chat, or I can't see your lovely, I can't see any faces because people have their cameras off, but I can't see people's names or my Teams screen. So can I get a thumbs up from people if people are clear on the activity? Or if people would like to turn on their cameras and give me, so either a virtual thumbs up. Okay, I've got some virtual thumbs up, so everyone's clear. Fantastic. Okay, great. So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. I'm going to give you maybe about, say, 7 or 8 minutes to work through that activity. So let's say we've got about 8 minutes, okay, to work through the activity. So you've got those 3 steps. So you're going to do the prompt. You're going to run the prompt, get it to generate the code book, and then you're going to have a chat about how useful you feel the code book is. So what you feel worked well, what felt reductive or misaligned. Okay, so I'm going to open up the rooms and pop people in. So let me just bear with me one moment. Okay, okay, so find participants, shuffle. Okay, so let's have a look. I'm going to set up 4 rooms. And I'm going to open those now. Okay, fantastic. So save. and open rooms.
Research for higher.
What?
I was just saying it's lovely to see some faces. So nice to see you all. Okay, I'm really interested to hear how people got on with that activity. Now I can't can I just check, can people see the slides?
level.
Yeah, fantastic. So I can, and I know it's probably not full view, but when I go back to kind of lots of me talking to the slides, I'll go back to that view. But at the moment, me keeping this screen open is enabling me to see you all, which is fantastic. So I'd love to hear if anyone would like to report back from any of the rooms in terms of how they got on with the prompt, when they ran the prompt and the data, what kind of code book did it create? Would anyone from, there was 3 people in room 1, would anyone who was in room 1 like to, yeah, maybe give a bit of a comment? You're very welcome to turn your microphones on, or if anyone wants to jump in, it would be great to hear from you. You're very welcome to turn your microphones on and chat. If you want to type in the chat, of course, you can do that. But sometimes it can be just really nice to hear from people and just have a conversation if anyone's happy to contribute. Or indeed, would anyone from any of the rooms like to share how they got on with the activity?
Yeah, we were doing it, and I don't know, we've been crossed out. So I just joined again to the session now. We've been doing it. We are in the question number 2. So
did everyone have an opportunity to run the prompt? Yeah, okay, great. Did everyone get to generate a code book? So the chat generated a code book for you? Yeah, okay, great. Would anyone like to share whether they felt, it worked well, was using that detailed prompt useful or maybe more useful than prompts you have run in the past? Yeah, okay, great. Any comment on any of the codes or the effectiveness of the code book?
When you say, Claire, are you saying code book? Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, Claire.
Sorry, Anne, I can hear you now. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay, no probs. Are you saying code book?
Yeah,
when
so
you say-
basically, yes, exactly. So what you were asking ChatGPT was to generate a code book. So again, if we think about the types of thematic analysis that we could use AI for, we're talking about basically coding reliability or for code books. So we're not going to be using it with reflexive thematic analysis. Okay, so basically coding reliability and code book are both structured approaches. So when we're asking it to if we have a look at the slide, so if we look at the slide here, let's go back to this slide here. So the question was generate a provisional code book from this data, okay? So anytime we have a code with a descriptor, that's basically a code book, okay? So we were
Perfect, yeah.
we were asking it to develop basically a short code book, so 3 to 5 codes, which technically is basically a really small code book. So in terms of the output that you got, did you feel that it was useful? Did you feel it reflected the data? Anyone like to share?
What was really good in our room, I think, is using, we got sort of broken away quickly at the end there, but using sort of prompts that you would usually use based on those initial bullet points there. So diving into the labels and the description and then the supporting quotes, that's easy. But then reflecting on the craft framework was really good because it made you go back and be more intentional about the specifics of what you were asking for. So I found that framework good, Claire, in that I could sort of, once I'd done the initial, or probably rushed into what you might normally do as prompts to generate something.
Yeah.
And then it was going back and looking at those keywords of what was the purpose, who were the audience for that particular code book, and even that migrant, the context as well. So going back to, well, actually, what was the context of this?
Yeah, great.
And that was useful to sort of go back in and then ask it to change what the code book it had originally generated with some further parameters using those craft tools.
Thanks, Anne. And I think some really key words you brought up there, and one of them is intentional. And I think that's, as I said, like using a prompt framework like the craft framework, what it's enabling you to do is, yes, to generate better output, but it's also making you to be much more intentional before you even engage with the AI. So it's really making you think about, what is it I'm actually trying to do here? What is the purpose? What am I looking for? What do I want you to do? Who is it for? What kind of output do I want? So I think that's slowing it down. I think in some ways, one of the really bad things about AI is the speed and this idea of fluency. Like, AI is great for demonstrating fluency, but there's a word that's kind of entered the popular lexicon, which is slop, to refer to often what AI generates. And so this is across like all different kind of uses, because we can get output that is, sounds very authoritative, is very fluent, is presented in a way that sounds really, factual, and that it knows what it's talking about. But really, when we go through it, it's just fluff, like it's just filler words. And often it's really not saying anything. Okay. And so that is an incredibly poor use of our time, like forgetting about even for research, like forgetting about the ethics of research. If it's for anything, it's just a bad use of our time, because we just end up down this rabbit hole where what it's given us is some fluffy kind of slop. And then we start engaging in a back and forth from that point on. And then before we know it, we've wasted an hour, our brain feels scrambled, and we're just more confused than when we began. Okay. So getting really intentional about what you're trying to do at the beginning is great for you. And also then it vastly improves the quality of the output that you're going to get. Okay, so you can see that there in terms of generating a code book, how it's going to be more effective. And as you said, Anne, then using the context for the study. Another word that you use that I really liked is parameters. And that's really key as well. So when we're thinking about what we're wanting AI to do, and it's a little bit like if we think about, say, if you were doing a systematic review and thinking about exclusion and inclusion criteria, okay? So thinking about that, like almost that's what you're doing with setting your parameters. I want you to do this. I don't want you to do that, okay? So being clear on what exactly is it I'm wanting it to do and what is the purpose of it. Abiba, I see you've got your hand up there. Would you like to, and I hope I haven't mispronounced your name, and my apologies if I have.
Yeah, no, you're correct. You correctly pronounced it.
Fantastic.
So I wanted to ask you about, maybe we use a piece of a script here, but if it is too long, for example, maybe 12 pages of interview, because I'm about to do my analysis in the near future. So how we gonna
How to decide how much is too much?
Yeah.
So that's a great question.
it's-
So look, okay, so one of the things you need to be aware of is, first of all, token limits, okay? So any exchange with AI has token limits, and the token limit, let's say on average, is about 4,000 characters, okay? Or 4,000 tokens. One token is equal to 4 characters. So if you are involved in an exchange, and that's input and output together, right? So in total, let's say 4,000 as kind of an average. If you go beyond 4,000 or you're reaching your token limit, the quality of what you're going to get back is going to be a lot less. Sometimes what you can see is you can, ask a question and you might get nothing back in return. Okay. And basically what that's telling you is that chat is basically reaching its token limit. Okay. What you've got to be really careful of is, excuse me, and I think this is again back to this point of fluency. Let's imagine you put 3 pages of an interview in, okay? And we'll talk about ethics in a moment, but let's say, ethics was no issue. Everything you're doing is in line with your epistemology and your ethics and all that, right? So let's say you put 3 interviews in, okay? You put 3 interviews in and you're like, generate a code book based on these 3 interviews, okay? Versus you put 1 interview in versus you put the first 2 pages of an interview in. If you put the first 2 pages of an interview in, what that's really inviting you to do then is to really, you've got a small amount of output. So you're going to be engaging much more closely with that output. And if there's something that you think again, thinking about using AI as an assistant, okay? So if I have this assistant and my assistant is helping me with my job, okay? And I'm like, hey, I want you to do this particular thing, okay? And she does that and she brings it back and I'm checking that thing and I'm talking through it with her versus getting her to do a huge task that then I'm not going to be able to check the detail of everything. I don't think I've explained that very well, but basically what I'm saying is you give it a small amount of data, you get it back. You can then refine that and really engage and think about what it's given you. You can ask then follow up your prompt with a different prompt, or what about this or what about that? Let's say you give it 12 pages of an interview or you give it a couple of interviews. You get that back. You've been given a much bigger volume of output. So then, let's say, for example, if there's 20 different questions that you have, or 20 different follow-up, or you want to explore the nuance of something more, how do you do that in a structured way? So let's say you start reading down through the output. The first thing you're thinking, okay, well, what about this? I want this particular thing changed, or I've got a question around this. Do you then ask a question pertaining to just that line? And do you want it to give you the whole output again? So you can see what's happening is this is going to get very, very messy. And if it keeps spitting out the same long document, how do you know what aspects of that have changed? And when I say document, I mean output. If it keeps spitting out the same output, how do you know which aspects of the output it's changed and which aspects it hasn't changed? What you're working down with is something that's quite large and unwieldy and much harder for you to actually have that oversight over. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, so should I feed the ChatGPT with a scramble of maybe transcripts, or based on the questions that I have follow up on?
So it comes back to, what are you wanting the AI to do? Like, are you wanting it to generate a code book? What are you actually wanting it to do? So again, getting really clear at the outset, what is the one specific task at this point I want this to do? And how can I give it content in a way that's not going to lead to some big, huge output that then I have to try and wade through? Because again, if there's 20 things you want to follow up in that output, how do you do that in a way that's structured, that's enabling you to, because what can happen is then all of a sudden you find yourself just drowning in versions. And this is part of the problem with the fluency. It appears really fluent, but a lot of what it's spitting out can just be absolute junk. Okay. And you need to make sure that you've got human oversight over each aspect. So really, it's about sitting down at the beginning and really mapping out, what is my question? What am I wanting support with? How can I do this in the most effective way that it's enabling me to have oversight over each element of it?
Okay, good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Okay,
much.
cool.
Thank
Okay,
you.
there was sorry, just to say as well to everyone that I did post the reference and reading list in the chat. So I just posted the link there to the document on the Google Drive. So please download that. Also, there's a question just in the chat about ethics. So with who should we get consent from about using data? So if we think about, doing an interview study or doing any kind of study with participants, informed consent means people understand what they're consenting to. So if you're using AI, that should be part of your overall informed consent. So people understand what their data is being used for. It's exactly like if you were doing interviews and you're telling people where their data will be stored. So it's exactly the same approach basically, and also thinking then about, do you need to do, if you're using AI as part of your study, you would need to declare that to your ethics committee. If you're planning to use AI for a publication, again, looking at the guidelines in that particular journal, potentially getting in touch with the editor. So just thinking about due diligence in terms of the ethics of doing research and where you need to disclose your AI use, okay, and making those judgments. Okay, so that was our first activity. So we've run the prompt and we've had a chat about the follow-up questions. What I want to have a look at now is using a different type of prompting. Okay, so we've had a go at using prompting the craft prompt and developing a code book for that piece of data. Okay. So I'm going to go to full screen here while I talk through this. So this is a different kind of prompting, which is Socratic prompting. And so the purpose of doing this is I just want to give you a bit of experience with trying two different styles of prompts. Okay. And so really what you're trying to do here with this Socratic prompting is it's like layered prompting. It uses chained reasoning. Okay. So we're guiding AI through descriptive and analytic observations. Okay. Again, we're not outsourcing the meaning making because that is our job. Okay. But we're basically developing a number of chained questions that we're asking, for our engagement with the AI. Each question builds on the previous one, and it's helping AI to simulate analytic thinking. And what we're trying to do is slow down the output and to encourage you as a researcher to reflect on each analytic layer. Okay, so these are some example questions. So you could, for example, put your quote. So here's our quote. So we put our quote into AI. We'll run through include the main elements of the craft prompt. So again, what's the context, who's it for, what's the output. So again, you can basically give it that kind of background, okay? But rather than just saying, create me a code book or create me 5 codes, asking a question like, what tensions or contradictions are expressed in this quote? Ask that question. It will give you output. Then on the basis of what it gives you, ask a follow-up question. Okay, so the follow-up questions really you should be developing as you're getting the output because you're responding to the output. Okay, so exactly like in an interview where you might choose to ask a participant a particular follow-up question based on what they've said. Okay, so I'm just giving you some examples here. So what aspects of identity are being managed or hidden? What emotions or social dynamics are visible? And so then based on the responses it's giving you, then ask it to suggest 3 to 5 provisional codes with brief explanations. So we can say 5 codes again, because that's what we used before. But basically what we're having a go at here is, rather than running one single prompt, we're doing a more layered prompting. Okay, so your layered or your Socratic prompting is using 3 or 4 chained prompts, and each prompt is based on the output it's just given you, okay? So obviously you don't need to every time say, who is it for? Because it's part of the conversation, if you like, with the AI, okay? So you've got your, your basic broad parameters in your first prompt. And then based on the output, then you're asking a follow-up question. Based on the output, you're asking a follow-up question. Based on the output, you're asking a follow-up question. Then you're asking it to develop codes with explanation. Because I just want you to have a sense of, if we run one single prompt, like the craft prompt, what's the output going to be like? If we engage in Socratic prompting, where we're doing that chained reasoning, what's the output going to be like? Is it going to be different? Is it more effective? Is it less effective? Okay. Because then after you leave the training, then you can make a decision of what kind of prompting is going to suit you for particular types of questions. So you might find, for example, that for a particular study or a particular question, you might choose to use one of these approaches, whereas a different study or a different question, you might choose to use a different type of prompt. Okay, so if we look at the handout, the participant handout, we can see the activities on the bottom of page 1. So we're comparing how a chained prompt affects AI output and depth of detail. Okay, so the task is literally what I've outlined. So now I'm just flicking onto page 2 of the handout. I've given you some example questions, so you can use those, some example progression. But what is going to be more useful and more authentic is for you to develop the progression questions based on the output that the AI is giving you. Okay, so do it in real time. Okay. And based on this, suggest 3 to 5 provisional codes. So let's say 5, because that's what we've just done. We've just done in the previous activity, we've asked for 5. So then you can compare those 2 code books. So then run the prompt. So run them as you're progressing through. So you're going to have a go at that activity. Again, I'm going to put you back into your breakout rooms. And the second activity is, I would like you just to compare, and this is what we're going to talk about when you come back from your breakout rooms, is comparing these 2 approaches. Okay, so comparing our craft prompting approach versus the Socratic prompting approach. And here are some reflection questions. I've given you 9. I absolutely don't expect you to talk about all of those questions. You can maybe choose 3 of those questions that feel the most pertinent, and you can have a chat about those in your group. One question I really want to draw your attention to is question 7, and I think this is something that was incredibly important. How did your confidence in your analytics skill affect how you evaluated or trusted the AI's output? Okay, so one thing we can see is AI can potentially really erode our confidence in our ability to do really solid analytic work, because we can start, and again, this is where cognitive sovereignty is so important. So if we feel not very confident in our ability, for example, as a qualitative researcher, and we're asking AI to help us, we may feel that we're deferring to AI and thinking, oh, well, maybe it knows better. Maybe its codes are better than my codes. I'm not really that confident in what I'm doing. So I'm actually going to kind of outsource my thinking and outsource my meaning making. As I hope I've illustrated, there are lots of problems with that in terms of epistemology, in terms of ethics, in terms of what we're trying to do as qualitative researchers. Another problem with that is all that is going to do is further and further and further erode your confidence. Okay. So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to slow down, be really intentional, and really thinking about how an exchange with AI is happening and how we are using AI. Are we using it as an assistant, which is what we wanted to do? Okay. We're using it in ways that allow us to engage in that kind of iterative thinking, that back and forth that is so important in qualitative research. Okay. What we absolutely don't want to be doing is outsourcing our thinking. So just being really mindful of those things. And as I said, you can choose whichever of those reflection questions you want to discuss, maybe 2 or 3 of those. I'll give you, let's say, about 7 minutes to do that task. So you're going to, as I said, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to do the Socratic prompting, okay, where you're going to do 3 to 4 change prompts. And again, you can do that activity together, okay, so just talking through in your group. 3 to 4 change prompts. Try and tailor each prompt to the output, okay, so you can get, if you want, one person, a different person in the group to, you know, share their screen and be the person who's kind of running the activity, if you like, or whatever way feels most useful in your group. But I want you then to compare the 2 outputs, okay? Socratic and your craft output, and choose maybe 2 or 3 of those reflection questions to have a chat about. So I'll pop you back in your breakout rooms. I'll give you about 7 minutes for the activity. And then when we come back, we can talk through. Now, I am mindful this is quite a short training, so we will be finished in just over an hour, but I'm also mindful that I haven't given people a break. I might get a show of hands. So if people feel that they need a 5-minute break or would really benefit from a 5-minute break at this point, if people could put their hand up, just their either their real hand or their team's hand. Okay, so we might just kind of go with so a couple of people, anyone else? A couple of people want to, okay, so you've got a few people wanting a break. I know 5 minutes is not a huge break, but I hope it would. Does 5 minutes sound okay? Could I maybe get a thumbs up if 5 minutes just enough to kind of go grab a coffee, run to the loo, whatever it is, because we are going to be finishing in just over an hour. Is 5 minutes okay, or is that too short? That's enough. Okay, great. Someone typed in that's enough. Fantastic. So let's say 6 minutes. Okay, so that just gives people a minute to kind of get moving. And then let's take that 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my timer on my phone now for 6 minutes. When we come back in 6 minutes time, so I'm setting the timer now. When we come back in 6 minutes, you know, I'll just say hi, welcome back, and we'll pop people straight in the breakout rooms to do those 2 activities. So I'll see you all back here very soon. Thanks, everyone. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope that was enough time for everyone to at least make a cup of tea, or maybe like me, heat your coffee up in the microwave. I might just wait to see some faces or some thumbs up so I know that people have returned. Just give people a moment to settle back in. Give me a thumbs up in the chat, or yeah, great. Couple of people have rejoined us. Fantastic, excellent. Welcome back. So I know that was a short break, but we will be finishing up in just an hour. So, okay, so again, just to recap, we are looking at these different styles of prompting. So Socratic prompting and craft. So what we've just done before in the previous activity was running that craft prompt and getting AI to generate a mini code book. So getting ChatGPT to generate a mini code book for us with the codes and the descriptors. And now we're just going to compare that craft prompt to the Socratic prompting. Okay, and again, the Socratic prompting is that kind of layered prompting where we have that chained reasoning. Okay, so this, then this, then this, then this. So really trying to get AI to simulate critical thinking. And then really thinking about, you know, what are the differences between those 2 types of prompts and what kind of output. And you might find that, you know, one of them for you is more favorable than the other, or maybe different styles might be useful for different types of questions you might have. But I just want to give you the opportunity to have a go at both of those. So as I said, we've got those 9 reflection questions on page 2. So just choosing 2 or 3 of those to have a chat about in your group. So I'll give you about kind of 8 minutes. I hope that's enough time for the activity. I'll pop into the room, see how people are going. Let me open the rooms, and I will pop people back in. Fantastic. Qasim, are you, did you get thrown out of a room, or would you like me to assign you into a room? Are you having trouble joining? Okay, let me know if I can assist if you're, sometimes it happens that we get thrown out of a breakout room and it can be a bit tricky getting back in. So if you need any assistance, please just let me know.
Hello, Claire.
Hi.
Thank you very much. I just mistakenly rejoined. Okay. Can you please assign me the room?
Sure. Do you know what room you were in?
Okay, just let me join.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Static.
Oh God.
Okay, so I know I haven't given people a lot of time for that, but what I would love to do is have a few broader conversations based on the conversations that you had. Again, it's totally up to you if your cameras are on or off. It's lovely for me to see your faces if you're happy to have your camera on. It's yeah, it's just really nice to see other humans. So sometimes I think when you're delivering training and you can't see anyone's faces, you just feel like you're shouting into the abyss. So it's so nice to see you all. I popped into a couple of the breakout rooms, and I think the conversations that we were having, they're so relevant for everyone in the group. And I just want to kind of bring it back to what was the function of the activity. So really what we are looking at is different prompting strategies, and for you to kind of tease out why you would use one over the other and what kind of situations might they be useful in. I was just in a room and I was just explaining, like, so what I would typically do is I do use that craft prompt strategy, but I also I'm very much using a Socratic element to it in that I'm always asking, but what about this? But why that? But what, so that, because the thing about qualitative research is it is very iterative. There is always that backwards and forwards, okay? And so if we think about the functioning of Socratic prompting, it's that kind of chained reasoning, okay? This, then this, then this, then this. So I suppose what it's trying to do is provide a structured way to really help ensure that you are, because again, qualitative research is very layered, okay? So that you are doing that kind of layered questioning. And so you don't, so while I do it and I don't call it Socratic prompting, I'm very aware I do it in a much more informal way. You will have your own practice and your own way for using AI. What I want you to take away from our training today when you leave here is recognizing that kind of epistemological tension, or what the epistemological issues or constraints are about using AI for qualitative research, okay? Thinking about, as I said, those ways that we're thinking, how can we use AI? What kind of role is it doing? Is it an amplifier? Is it a mirror? Is it an assistant? So how are we actually conceptualizing, okay? Thinking about our prompt strategies, and then also when we're thinking about a thematic analysis, recognizing that it is not a single approach. So we've got those three different types of approaches. We've got reflexive, which is our Broad and Clark. If it's sitting in big Q qualitative research, which reflexive is, we can see there's an incongruence there between what reflexive work holds qualitative research to be and what AI is actually capable of. So we can see there's that incongruence. We can see it sits better in that kind of code and reliability place, or that we can use it in that kind of middle queue, that code book. But again, how are we using it? Are we outsourcing our thinking, or are we maintaining cognitive sovereignty? Okay, there's another word I want to throw into the mix here, or expression: beautiful inefficiencies. Okay. And I think that's a really nice way to conceptualize qualitative research. So qualitative research is slow. It is messy. If you are doing an analysis and you don't find yourself at a point of thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm so confused, I think you've done something wrong. Okay. Part of doing qualitative research is like moving between fog and clarity, fog and clarity. You have those moments of fog that you think, I don't know. Okay. The moments of I don't know, they are a fundamental part of doing qualitative research. If we are taking our data and we're saying, here's my data, here's AI, and we're putting our data into AI and we're getting an output, that's not qualitative research. That's something entirely different. Okay. But I'm also not saying that we can't use AI. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I feel my job today is to help you critically think through how you can use AI in ways that can support your qualitative work without you outsourcing your thinking or without you sacrificing the integrity of your work. Okay. So I know the activities we're doing, I'm not giving you a lot of time to do them. And I do know we're kind of covering probably quite a bit of dense content in a short period of time. But I really want to give you a lot to take away from our training. And then those practical activities and those practical frameworks like that craft prompt, like that frame acronym, and applying that to thinking about, ethical AI use and what are we wanting it to actually do, and is it capable of doing what we're trying to get it to do. Okay. So with all of that said, we might chat through some of these questions together, and I would be delighted if people would be happy to maybe share an opinion or just talk about what your experiences of comparing those two types of prompting strategies. Did anyone feel there was a difference across the two outputs? So with your craft output and your Socratic prompting output, like, was there a difference? Did you feel that one gave you a better output than the other? Yeah, please
Yeah.
jump in, Mai.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So like I have tried to have some prompts on both craft and Socratic. And from my understanding, I think craft prompts might be more relevant for you to make sense of the data that you are analyzing, just to build up like a broader view about what might be the possible themes that you can identify in your data set. And then if you want to go deeper into analyzing a particular themes in that code books, you can use the Socratic prompts to have a sequence of prompts that give you some idea, like some insights about some particular features of the themes that you are analyzing. So if your research questions is all about identifying all the themes in the data set, then craft might be more relevant. But if you want to explore a particular themes that might emerge from your data set, then Socratic might be the best one to use. So that is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. And it can be difficult as well in a group of people where people don't know each other, to put forward an opinion. So thank you so much for sharing that. So it's exactly that. It's really teasing out and thinking about, again, what we're talking about is very deliberate and intentional use of AI. Okay. And so you're not using it, if you're using it to assist your research, you're not using it in a passive way, but you are being really active. Okay. You're being really like, it's like, if your boss or whatever said to you, we've got some money and you can hire an assistant. Would you like to do that? And of course you would say, yes, that's amazing. And they say, okay, can you write up a position description? You would never say, oh, look, I can't be bothered. Any person will do, just whatever. It doesn't matter. I can't be bothered writing the position description. For you to write a position description means you have to sit down and think, what are the tasks I want help with? What skills do I need this person to have? What do I want this person to do? So you would never say, I can't be bothered. Anything will do. it's exactly the same with what you're getting AI to support you with, okay? You've got to be clear on what you're wanting it to do. And then when you're thinking about these different strategies, why one might be more effective than the other, okay? My 2 words that you said I want to pick up on, if you don't mind, and I think they're just really useful for, again, thinking about what we mean by big Q qualitative research. So I'm looking for my little dinosaur, which might have fallen on the floor. The 2 words are identify, and you also said emerge. And so what I just wanted to, I cannot find my dinosaur, but I can use anything else. So something that's real. So we can say, I've got my little Russian dolls here. So here's the little Russian dolls. Oh, sorry for the noise. So if we're saying the themes emerge from the data, or we identify the themes in the data, those words emerge and identify, they speak to a pre-existing reality. They speak to something that is objectively there, and the job of the researcher is to uncover something that already exists, a concrete objective reality, okay? If we're talking about big Q qualitative research, we're actually not using that type of language. What we're talking about is the themes are actively constructed. The researcher builds the themes. We construct the themes. Okay. And so while you might think, oh, well, is that not just semantics? They're actually really, really important distinctions. And again, then if we think about AI use, so if we're thinking about identifying themes and themes emerging, then we're saying we can extract the themes from the data. We can put the data into AI and get it to extract the themes, because we're talking about an inevitability. We're talking about a singular objective reality. We can see that's really different than saying that qualitative research is inherently interpretive practice, and I need to bring my subjectivity to the table to do that interpretation. It has to be human meaning making. Okay, so we can see then that there is an incongruence. So it's just really important that we're thinking about what is it that what is our theoretical perspective, or what is our epistemological position? And then what is it that we're wanting AI to do? And do these 2 things fit together? Do they work? And if they don't work, what then does that mean for the decisions I'm making around my data and my analysis? So we're talking about being really deliberate and being really intentional in how we're using AI, okay? So I'm not here to tell you to use AI or not to use AI. Again, my job is to equip you with these kind of skills and tools so you can make those decisions about where it is appropriate, where it's not appropriate, and how you can use it most effectively. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. And again, just back to that question of confidence, I just want to highlight that again, how there is always a risk of, if we start using AI to support our analysis, that then we start thinking, oh, maybe I'm not that good at this, it's seeing things that I'm not really seeing. Again, the beautiful inefficiencies. Qualitative research is slow, it is messy, and when we are engaging in data analysis, it is an iterative process. We build our analysis in layers, okay? We don't, when you're reading someone's research paper, it's like Instagram when you're looking at other people's highlight reels, okay? And you're looking in your messy house and you're like, oh my God, look at these people's houses. They're beautiful. Their kids are so well behaved. Their houses are so tidy. And you're thinking, God, my house is an absolute mess. Looking at other people's published research is a little bit the same. You don't see the process. What you see is the outcome, okay? And most of qualitative research is actually process. So we've got to be careful. Yes, we're using AI to support, but we're not outsourcing thinking, and we recognize that the process is still really, really important. Okay, so I hope all that makes sense. I'm going to continue on if that's okay. Does anyone have any questions from what we've just spoken about? Yeah. Abiwa, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, we have seen that the prompts or the transcripts from a single person could be inputted in such a way, but how can we analyze more than one transcript, or how can we analyze the patterns from different people's interviews using maybe ChatGPT or
Well, you could put all of your data in and you could say, give me the themes for this data set. But then you're basically, I suppose, getting AI to do, like there's lots of things you could do. You could put the transcripts in one at a time, and you could get AI to analyze each transcript, and then you could put all of those separate pieces in to get it to consolidate or synthesize. You could put all of your transcripts in, but if you do that, basically it means that AI has done the analysis. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so you could put the whole lot in and say, do an analysis, and you could get it to write up the whole thing for you. But again, where does that sit down within what we're wanting to do as qualitative researchers? Yeah?
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Here. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Any other
thank you.
questions before we continue? Okay, right. I'm going to go back to the slides. Okay, so we've talked through our two different prompting strategies. So what we were talking about there was, developing a code book. And so what I just want to look at now is applying a code book, okay? So applying a shared code book to a transcript using both manual and AI-assisted coding. So what we might do for this activity is we might just do the AI-assisted coding part. So what we have is, on page 3 of your handout, you can see you have a mini code book, okay? So we're on activity 4. And we're looking at code book application. We're using a different quote here. So this is from a person called Sam. And Sam says, so the interviewer says, can you tell me about how different environments shape how you express yourself? And Sam says, I've always felt like I was straddling two worlds. At home, everything was steeped in our language, our customs, but at school, it was all about fitting in, speaking the right way, knowing the cultural codes. Sometimes I wonder if I was performing a version of myself just to get through the day. I'm proud of where I come from, but I've also learned how to hide parts of it. So that's our quote. And then we have a mini code book. So we've got 5 codes. So the mini code book has been developed by AI. Okay, so we're not going to do 4.1. We're going to skip that. We're going to go to 4.2, the AI assisted coding. Okay. And what I'd like you to do is develop a prompt that asks AI to apply the provided code book to the SAM excerpt. Okay, so you can copy and paste the code book into AI, but basically what you want to know is which piece of data does each code pertain to? Okay, because basically what you've been given is you've been given the code, you've been given the description of the code, but we don't know which actual piece of the data each of those 5 codes pertains to, and that's what we want to check. Okay, so you're going to put together a prompt, so using the craft prompt framework, and you're going to input your prompt and then copy and paste your code. So you're going to include the code names and the definitions, and you're going to ask for a justification or matching quote for each code. Sorry, sorry, someone is talking. Let me just go back to my chat screen. Is everyone okay? Is everyone clear on what I'm asking them to do? Yeah, could I get some thumbs up? Fantastic. Okay, great. Okay, so we're just wanting AI to tell us which aspect of that quote each of those codes pertains to. Okay, So what I might get people to do is, if people want to do this as an individual activity, so you can develop your craft prompt, and then put your prompt and copy and paste your code book into AI, and let's see what results it gives back. So I'll give people about 5 minutes for that activity. If people want to give me a thumbs up when they're finished, or turn on the camera and I can see when people's heads are raised that they're done. If people's heads are down, I can see they're busy. If people's heads are raised, I know they're done. But let's say we'll take about 5 minutes for that activity, and we'll do that as an individual activity. Okay, so I'm going to put my timer on for 5 minutes, but again, if you are finished, please feel free to give me a thumbs up. Okay, fantastic. Just want to check in. How are people going with that activity? People done? Have had enough time? Yeah, I might get some thumbs up if people are finished. Great. Okay, we've got a few thumbs up. Okay, I'd love to hear how people went with that. So in terms of asking AI for the excerpt, the aspect of the text that each of the codes related to. So did you feel it was useful? Did you feel it was in any way, you cannot see anything? Okay, sorry, I think share might have gone off. Let me reshare. My apologies. Thank you for letting me know. As I said, I'm having a little trouble with my Teams today, so very much appreciate people's patience with that. Okay, so any thoughts on how effective it was at actually applying the code book to the data, or identifying the aspects of the data that the codes pertained to?
I liked something about this exercise, which was that it's kind of holding AI accountable for what it's coming up with, because we know we've seen, you've seen it with like the Trump administration. They released a document and it was full of hallucinated references, because AI can hallucinate. What I will say though is it matched. So, and again, I don't know if it would have been the same for everyone. It gave me, for number 3, the sense of belonging. The corresponding text it gave for sense of belonging was, sometimes I wonder if I was performing a version of myself just to get through the day. And I can kind of see where it's coming from, but I actually don't really agree with that. So then I kind of did that Socratic prompting, and I was like, well, can we explore this further? What other sort of things? Yeah. So I feel like that maybe might align more with social exclusion, but it's nice because I think it's an accountability piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sorry, you go, Tara, go.
I was just going to say, so it actually felt quite obvious when it would say, I don't know why, but doing this particular exercise, it felt quite obvious if something were to come up and I didn't agree with it. So I disagreed with what it said. I don't know why, but it just felt more obvious than the other exercises we had done. So that's good. That's good to know.
Fantastic. And just, I want to pick up on your point about hallucination. So about 20%, and we find this a lot with references, but with all sorts of things, you can expect up to about 20% of what you get back to be hallucinations, okay? And there's no way around that. It is simply, again, it is just part of how it arrives at that output, okay? And so I know you mentioned an example of the Trump administration. There was a recent example in Australia with Deloitte. So Deloitte was commissioned to do a report for a government department, and the government had spent $440,000. And it was an academic who actually was like, hang on a second, some of these references are actually not correct. And there was a legal case in the report that was actually totally fabricated. And so to me, it's not just the problem of the references. What the bigger problem for me is, references relate to knowledge claims. Why are we using a reference? Because we're making a particular knowledge claim. Where did the knowledge claim come from? And this is what we're talking about with accountability, okay? If you are putting something out into the world, like we are in the business of, again, meaning and meaning making, and putting research out into the world, which adds to knowledge in a particular field, okay? who is responsible for those knowledge claims? You are responsible for the knowledge claims that are generated as a result of your research. So, making sure everything you're doing has a human oversight. And so, the kind of prompting strategies we're talking about, there are ways that we can do that. But I really like, as you said, if this makes it feel like, that you're kind of checking that accountability, you're holding it accountable, and again, asking those probing questions. And so we can see now how we can use it in lots of different ways. And we're using it in that kind of back and forth. Okay. But just again, to highlight the point that qualitative research is slow. Obviously, I know I've only given you kind of, short excerpts, but in real life, if we were working with data, we're really thinking about the words. We're always asking, what does it mean? What does it mean? It's always active engagement with the data. And so we have to maintain that we're always actively engaging with our data, but we're also actively engaging with AI. Okay. Right. So does anyone else want to add anything in terms of their musings on this activity or how they felt AI went with applying that code book? Yeah.
Maybe just a question. So would it be better if we develop the code first by ourselves and then interrogate AI? Maybe
that's such a great question. Yeah. So look, what I would say to that is, I always think it's better to do it yourself first, okay? Because if you're doing it yourself first, you are, again, actively engaged with your data, okay? We always need to do that. When we're doing qualitative research, we need to know our data inside out. We need to be intimately involved with our data, that we know it really well. We're asking those questions. What does that mean? Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? Always that active engagement. So if we generate a code book or we do our coding, and then we ask AI maybe to do what we've just done, we then have a point of comparison, okay? And what that can do is it can enable us to maybe see things that we might have interpreted differently. It can potentially open up different ways of looking at the data, okay? And so then we can have conversations with AI, and that can kind of help potentially add more depth to our thinking, okay? If, on the other hand, we run something through AI and we ask AI to develop me a code book for this data, it's very hard to unsee what you've seen. So if you have your data and you ask AI to develop a code book, you have seen what it's given you. And therefore, then that is going to color your engagement with your data. That is going to impact on how your orientation and what you are seeing in your data. So my strong suggestion would be always do it yourself first. Okay, and that's such a useful question. So thank you so much for raising that. Okay, we are going to go back to our slides. I'm going to put that on large view. Okay, and we're going to move on to the next activity. So that again is our SAM quote. And so we're going to have a go now at, we haven't got a whole heap of time, so we're going to do this quite quickly. Grouping your code manually and then getting AI to do the grouping. So given that, in terms of our time constraints, and I just want to give enough time for this activity, what we might do is go straight to number 2 here. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, again, thinking about your craft prompt, so developing that prompt and asking ChatGPT. So basically you're giving it the code book and you're asking it to develop 2 candidate themes. Okay, so what you're basically going to do is develop your prompt. So here's my prompt. Here is the code book. Give me 2 candidate themes. You're going to ask it to name each theme and to give you a rationale. Okay, so to name the themes and give you a rationale. So the rationale is like a short explainer, okay? A short explainer of each theme, okay? So we're going to skip over number 1 and go straight to number 2. So you're going to give ChatGPT 1, the prompt to generate codes. sorry, you're not to generate themes, okay? The prompt to generate themes. The second thing you're giving it is the code book, and you're asking it to generate 2 candidate themes, give each a name, and provide a rationale. Okay, I'll give people about maybe up to 5 minutes for that activity. I'll leave you in your individual setting. I'm going to escape out of the large screen so I can go back and see people in Teams. I'll put my timer. And again, please give me a thumbs up if you're finished before the timer goes off. Yeah, please feel free to give me a thumbs up. Okay, I might just check in how people are going with that activity, if people are nearly finished or they're able to run the prompt. Okay, have we been able to get AI to generate 2 themes for that data? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so would anyone like to share what the themes that it generated were? Okay, or if you feel the themes represented the data. Okay, so we've got someone's posted here in the chat box, Tara, thank you. So navigating cultural boundaries. Okay, there we have a rationale for that. Okay, adaptation. Yeah, fantastic. And the performance of identity. Okay, great. So I hope that other people were able to, yeah, obviously in the real world, you'd never be working with the data set so small. So I think it's just a good opportunity to, kind of test out the capacity of AI with a very small data set. But as I said, a little while ago, I would absolutely urge you to make sure that you do the work manually first and then get AI to kind of support the work that you are doing. So some things that I'd like you to kind of take away in terms of thinking about AI further. What elements of analysis might you use AI for in your own research, and really reflecting on what these activities taught you about what AI can and cannot do. So I'd really love you to, reflect on those questions with AI in your own practice. When we're thinking about ethics, there are a number of ethical considerations. So we do need to think about confidentiality and data protection. We need to think about informed consent and making sure that we're disclosing AI in research outputs. And then also then your own reflexive accountability. So why am I using AI? What are the risks or distortions? And thinking about that frame. So how does it fit with frame? Would you disclose? And it's important that we are disclosing and documenting use of AI and upholding the rigor, the transparency and care towards both your work and your participants. So these are really our key takeaways from our training. So thinking about those different prompt strategies, AI assisting with organization, but making sure that we are doing the interpreting, okay? And also documenting and reflecting on how you're using AI and using Frame to guide your AI use. So I do realize we've covered quite a lot in quite a short time, but I am aware that our time is coming to a close. I would love to take a photo if I could. If people were happy for me to take a photo, I would love to share it on LinkedIn. So if people are happy to be in a photo, it would be so amazing if you could turn your cameras on. If you're not happy to be in a photo, that's totally fine. But it's always so lovely to see some faces. And I would love to tag you. So if you're happy for me to tag you in LinkedIn, if you want to pop your name in the group chat, I will tag you. If you don't want me to tag you, don't put your name in the group chat. So if you want to put your name in the chat, I would love to tag you. If you don't want me to tag you, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn anyhow. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll just give anyone else a moment if they want to turn on their camera. for a photo. Okay, maybe. Oh, great. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Any final takers? Oh my God, look at that. It's incredible. Fantastic. It's so lovely to see faces. And you've come on and you've gone back off again. But I might just take a snap.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Lovely. Thank you. I would love to stay connected with you all. I just want to really quickly just tell you about other ways that if you are interested in working with me further, other ways that we can work together or other work that I do. Can you see the screen? Not sure. Let me just minimize that. Oh my God, there's too many screens here. Let me. Can you see those flyers? I'm not sure if people can see those. Yeah, not sure because I can't I can't actually hear anyone. So maybe people you can see them. Fantastic. Okay.
Yes.
So just some other trainings that I run, if anyone is interested in working together further. So I do a 2-day thematic analysis masterclass, also a 2-day research design masterclass. I also have a new membership for qualitative researchers that is starting in January. So I'm really excited about this. If it's something that you might be interested in, more than happy to share more information with you. So just if any of those options might be of interest to you, I'm obviously always happy to chat further. But it's been, just absolutely my pleasure to be working with you for our training today. I do a newsletter that I send out every fortnight that always has, I basically pick a topic for the month and it's just basically research, tips. I kind of move between thematic analysis, research design, and AI because they're kind of the core areas that I work in. If you would like to receive my newsletter, if you want to pop your name in the group chat, I can make sure that you get that. If you do put your name in and then you decide you don't want it, you can just unsubscribe. But if that's something that would be useful for you, so it's just different, research tools, different resources, and just tips, and I just send that out every fortnight. So, but whether it's through LinkedIn or the newsletter, it would be lovely to connect further. And yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful working with you for our training this afternoon. So I hope that has been useful. It is, as I said, I know it's kind of quite a lot to take in, and particularly when we are talking about things like epistemology and ontology and different research paradigms, it can be a bit to wrap your head around. But I just really want to outline what those kind of core considerations are for using AI in qualitative research, and just making sure that, we are practicing due diligence and we are aware of the implications of using AI in our. Yes, you go.
Can I just interrupt you here?
Please do, go for it.
Quickly, I'm thinking to use it for my PhD student, but as a supervisor, I also need to be mindful that what I'm suggesting my PhD student is already tested. So as we know that we just started using AI for research and thematic analysis, how we can tackle the reviewer comments for using AI for thematic analysis. Because eventually we need to publish, we need to look at the comment from the examiner. So how much confidence I can have from you so that I can think of using AI for thematic analysis?
Well, again, it comes back to what kind of thematic analysis are you doing, and is AI use appropriate for that kind of thematic analysis? That's your very, very first question. How do you decide what type of thematic analysis you're doing? Well, that comes back to what is your research question and what are the aims of your piece of research. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But at the same time, I'm also concerned that because there is no reference yet, right, that people used AI and that the research been done. So
okay,
we do not have past reference to support.
Yeah, so I've given you, were you able to access the reference list from the chat?
Yep.
So in there are lots of references of AI being used in qualitative research and AI used in thematic analysis. So that was why I provided that reference list.
Okay. So you suggest that by using those references, we can justify that why in our research we are using AI for thematic analysis.
No. It comes back to, again, what is your research question? What are the aims? And so let's say, for example, if you were saying that you were using AI for reflexive thematic analysis, I would say that's never going to be appropriate. If you were using it to assist with your analysis with reflexive thematic analysis, that's never going to be appropriate, because there's a total incongruence between the big Q qualitative research and what AI can actually do. There's an incompatibility there. If you're using it for example, codebook or coding reliability, yes, you can use it to support your analysis, but I'd also be checking in what is the policy within your university. And if you're publishing in particular journals, actually checking what the journal guidelines are. So first and foremost, it depends on, is AI use in line with your theoretical paradigm? And so if it is not, then then it doesn't make sense to use it from the get-go. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then if it is in line with your theoretical paradigm, then checking in with your institution, that could be through the ethics committee. And also if you're planning to publish, just checking in with those particular journals in terms of, are there any implications around AI use for, what ways can you use AI? What ways can you use AI that it will not result in your paper being rejected for that particular journal? But first and foremost, it depends on your research question, your research aims, the paradigm you're using, and whether there's a fit. So that's why we started this session with looking at that epistemological underpinning, because that's your first port of call. Okay, does AI use make sense with that particular theoretical paradigm? So let's say you're doing big Q qualitative research, it doesn't make sense with that particular paradigm. There's an incongruence, okay? So that's the first thing you need to figure out. Then if it does make sense to use AI, using it in ways that, again, thinking about like with that frame approach, that framework, how am I using it? Making sure it's being used as an assistant. You're not outsourcing, your thinking, you're maintaining your cognitive sovereignty, but also checking that within your institution, what are the policies around AI use for a PhD thesis? And if you're planning to publish from that thesis, which journals, and just checking what their policies for AI use are. And then thinking about, if you're working with live participants and you're, what you need to include within your documentation for participants in terms of, say, informed consent. So if their interview data is going to be going into AI, just so that they know, because really what it's about transparency, right? So first of all, we're making sure that we have alignment and fit between our theoretical perspective and the use of AI, okay? And then if we're like, yeah, I've got a green light here, everything fits together. So we're thinking about coherence. And that's why, I do that 2-day masterclass on research design, because we need to be thinking about making sure that each aspect of our research design, there is that coherence. Okay, there's coherence between all aspects of our design. Okay, so if we're like, yeah, this is coherent with my theoretical perspective, it's not compromising the integrity of my research design, then we're just then sitting in the space of, well, what do I need to do to make sure that my use is transparent and that I'm not going to find myself in hot water down the track. So you don't want to do something that then you're like, oh my God, someone's like, yeah, you can't do that. You get a paper rejected. And you're like, God, I wish I'd thought about that in advance. So just really thinking through what are the things that the stumbling blocks that you might come up against, and just basically doing those checks. over the next couple of years, we are going to see much clearer policies, but at the
Yes.
moment, it's just so movable.
It
And
is.
that's kind of, we're sitting in kind of murky waters at the moment. But I think that's why training like this is so important and these conversations are important. And so what we don't want is people using AI in covert ways because they're kind of afraid that they're going to, get in trouble or there's going to be some kind of, issue. What we want is that we can openly have these conversations. And what we're doing is we're building skills and we're building our critical, AI literacy. And I think they're the kinds of conversations that we need to be having with students as well.
Yep.
So
Thank you
I hope
very
that's
much.
a useful answer. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so
Yep.
much. Sorry, we've gone
Just a
little bit
quick
over time.
comment. Just a quick comment as an academic, for this 3-hour session, I think it would be better to have break in every hour because so many technical knowledge are coming. So if for the next session, because obviously I'll not be in that session, but for your next cohort of student, if you give a break every hour, that gives a little bit of time to, adopt all the knowledge and then start. So just
No
a
problem.
comment, just a comment for
That's
you.
great. Thank you very much. So basically less content and more breaks.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. That's really helpful. Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Take care.
so much.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
million. Really appreciate your time. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.